It's raining. I don't know if you can tell that. I don't know if that makes a difference for you. But I was wondering, would you like to join me in a belly massage? Oh, yes. Hmm. Wow. There are so many nerve endings. Our bellies store so much information. And I spent so much time trying to hide my belly. I can remember in high school visiting a friend of mine, and her dad was relaxing on his back, and his shirt was halfway up his torso, and his belly was out. I can't remember if his hand was on it, or if it was just exposed. Either one would have been jarring to me at the time, because we live in this world where there's so much shame and stigma for having a body. And this shame is so intense that as I talk about it, I feel this need to set a barrier, a boundary. With my sunglasses. Because it's so normalized to hate our bodies, to hate our bellies, and that keeps us from connecting with our sacredness. And this is a space that is all about our sacredness, that is all about connecting with our bodies and celebrating our bodies and listening to them. And that requires some major shifts. From the anti-belly fat phobia that we're used to. It is time to make space for our bodies to normalize the infinite shapes and sizes, physiologies, functionalities, abilities and disabilities, exceptionalities, to celebrate these containers that we exist in. I want to make space here for your body to be celebrated, for my body to be celebrated, for our belly buttons to be celebrated. That is the sound of a cat coming out of the house. The cat is liberating itself. And sometimes we need structures. We need ways to express ourselves, ways to come out of the many different closets and wardrobes, and you fill in the blank, that we can be boxed in, holding ourselves back, thinking that there isn't space for us. To exist in the sacredness that just is, that is a part of us, that is a part of our bellies, that is a part of our hearts. And talking about our sacredness and our bodies feels dangerous. But my intention is to cultivate safety. My intention is to make space for all of us to be, to live, to laugh, to love courageously. And when we live in a world where just letting our belly exist in open air is so jarring, we have a lot of work to do to get to a place where we're not hiding, where we can just be, where we can appreciate the wonders of sitting in water, of playing with water. And as adults, how often do we get to experience joy, play, or even just tune in to our bodies and listen to what they're telling us? My body is saying, I want a big exhale. Do you want to join me in a big exhale? This is one of the ways that we can calm our nervous systems when we live under constant stress. A big exhale. We get to control our breathing. Sometimes it may seem like there's not very much that we have control over. But we do breathe and control our breathing. And sometimes that is one of the most important ways that I ground myself. I wonder if you've found the same to be true. Do you want to place a hand or two hands on your belly and take some deep breaths? Our bodies are sacred. Our bellies are sacred. We are sacred. When we remember to breathe, that is also a sacred remembering of a sacred act, or at least it can be. I wonder, what is sacred for you? Is water sacred? Are you hydrated? What do you need? What do you want? Your needs are sacred. Your wants are sacred. You are sacred. All of you is sacred. And I'm wondering if you've lost touch with that truth, the undeniable truth of our individual and shared sacredness. And if you have, I understand. Tuning into our sacredness is a practice. And it's a practice that we need to practice. Which probably goes without saying, but how often do we practice sacredness? When was the last time that you participated in a sacred practice? And when I say a sacred practice, I mean a practice around the sacredness that includes our sacredness. Because if we're tuning into a sacredness that excludes our own sacredness, what does that teach us about what is sacred? And I say this coming from a place of knowing our individual and shared sacredness. I share this from a place of wanting to cultivate a capacity for our sacredness, because just because it exists does not mean that we are aware of it or that we are tuned into it. Because most of us have little or no awareness of this frequency, let alone tuning into. Because knowing something and tuning into it or feeling it are two very different things. So we might intellectually know that we are sacred, but not be able to feel it, to practice that muscle of sacredness within our bodies. So where do we go from here? What do you think? I am not the expert of sacredness. I am practiced at feeling my feelings, at sitting in hot water for extended periods of time, but I do not have all the answers. But I do have questions, and I believe in your sacredness and in your questions and your ability to tune into your sacredness through practice, to feel the sacredness that exists within and around us. And I'm wondering if you were to listen to your body, what might it tell you? Is there something that your body is seeking? Something that your body wants or needs? Are you feeling thirsty or hungry Is it time to fortify yourself in sacred ways? And what might that look like for you? Because you know your body better than I do. You know what you need, what you feel, and what you want. And you are in the best position to provide for yourself. I'm still working on traveling through time and space, and I have a lot of work to do before I can get to a place where I feel more confident in these travels. So in the meantime, you are the expert for your own body. And I'm wondering if you would like a massage, perhaps a scalp massage. And how that might feel. And if you would want maybe a little bit of nail to dig in, or maybe more of a light touch. And to see how that feels. Because your body is sacred. And your touch, your fingers on your scalp is sacred. And feeling the pleasure of these fingers may just be a sacred practice. And it may be our first sacred practice in a very long time. And if we are going to tune into our sacredness, why not start with our heads and our hands, our fingers, and our thumbs, in case they're not included, in fingers. Have you ever fingered your hair before? How does it feel? How do you want to be touched? How do you want to experience your body? What do you want? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh. Wow. Are you scratching yourself? I feel quite itchy all of a sudden. Oh, but it feels good. It's kind of a sacred itch right at the center of my head. Oh. And if you combine that with a long exhale, that is a sacred practice. And you might find some sort of experience. A feeling the sacredness that perhaps we didn't really know existed. I'm wondering, can you see the steam that is coming from this water? Can you feel the heat that is moving How is that practice for you? Sometimes I feel rushed to go from one activity to the next without really taking the time to slow down and to feel. Your body is sacred, and I hope that through the invitation for a head massage, a scalp massage, that you are able to feel your sacredness. And if you weren't, I ask you to be gentle with yourself, because it can take time to get to a place where we can tune into our sacredness. It might not happen on our first attempt, or our second, or our third, but in my not so humble opinion, the sacredness of our bodies is one of the most sacred things that we can practice. And I think it's worth it. And if we disagree, we disagree. Everything that I share is an invitation. It's an opportunity. There's no expectation or pressure. This is for you. This time is for you to tune into your body, to tune into your feelings, your muscles, your heart. And sometimes we will get interrupted, but that's okay. Sometimes we will get into times and energies that it can be difficult to know what to do, or maybe even how we feel. And that might be a time to step out of the hot tub, to cool off, to press pause or stop. And that is totally important. Probably the top priority. What do you think is the top priority? I think it's our relationship with ourselves and our ability to make mistakes, to speak in draft, because I'm not the most polished person. I speak in draft. I have no script. This is my heart speaking to yours, or attempting to invite a sacredness into this water, this air, all of it. And sometimes it can be really hard to feel that energy of sacredness. It can feel almost impossible, especially if we're facing barriers and obstacles to feeling safe, to feeling witnessed, understood, respected, or like we belong. And we live in this world where so many of us are struggling in so many different ways. And I recognize that I have a lot of privilege and access. I'm sitting in a hot tub, which in and of itself is an incredible privilege. This is my first lived experience of having consistent ease with access to a hot tub, and I want to share this privilege with you as much as I possibly can. Share this energy with you, this steam, this vibe of sacredness. because I understand that 99.9% of people will probably never have an opportunity to have such easy access to hot water. And there's something sacred to the elements, to the temperature, to the steam, and the fresh air, and the nature. And I don't want to have it just for myself. I believe in sharing. I believe in making space for each other, in the sacredness of all living beings. And of course, we are included in this sacredness. Of course. And yet, I wonder how many of us actually feel connected to this sacredness that is within us, between us, and beyond. Given the current state of the world, I imagine the number is quite low. I think we are largely out of alignment, out of practice, disconnected from ourselves and each other. And I want to share this with you in hopes that we can practice reconnecting with our bodies, reconnecting with our spirit, our spirit of sacredness. And the way that I know to do that, I misspoke. There's more than one way that I know how to do that. And I imagine that there are multiple ways that you may also know, or have known, or will know one day, how to make space, make a safe space for your sacredness. And if you don't know any right now, that's okay. There's no need to know in this moment. Sometimes it can be helpful to have a gentle mirror and while I'm guessing our mirror reflections are not a perfect mirror, I wonder if on some metaphysical, spiritual, energetic level we can be gentle mirrors for one another. is something that you would like to do, if that is a practice you would like to try, if you want to try and mirror each other, perhaps with a heart, perhaps with a massage, perhaps with holding our hands, creating some sort of a loop from chest to elbow, hand to hand, elbow, shoulder, and back to our heart. Do you want to place your left hand on your heart with me? This might just be a sacred practice. If you feel it, if you want it, we are sacred. Our hearts are sacred. Our bodies are sacred. Our breaths are sacred. And speaking to these sacrednesses of our hearts, our bodies, our heads, our hair, naming our sacredness. We can mirror each other and name our sacredness, and that is a sacred practice. I'm starting to overheat, to feel the steam accumulating in my hair, my head, in my body, and feeling heat, feeling steam, and feeling our feelings. These are also sacred acts. How are you feeling? And when I ask you how you're feeling, I really fucking mean it. I know we live in this world where we say, how are you? How are you doing? And usually there isn't actually space for us to say what's in our hearts, to say what's going on in our bodies, how connected or disconnected we're feeling on any given day. And I get that. think so many of us live our lives surrounded by environments and cultures where there actually isn't the space that we need emotionally, energetically, to speak our truth, to say that we're having a really tough day, to say that we are effing exhausted and we have so little left to give after giving so much. And I say that not trying to take away from your struggle, but actually in an attempt to make space for the many barriers and challenges to speaking our truth, to saying how we really feel, and to trusting that we can be transparent without facing some sort of punishment or being misunderstood or having that information used against us. And I think many of us are probably afraid to be vulnerable because our vulnerabilities may have been used against us in the past. But vulnerabilities are not necessarily weaknesses. I would argue, when used with intention and strategically, our vulnerability is our strength. It speaks to our courage. And this challenges the traditional understanding of strength that exists within our culture, where strength is the absence of vulnerability. But there are a lot of things that are misunderstood in our culture. And strength and vulnerability is probably one of the biggest myths that we have. And together, through gentle mirroring, we can make space to be imperfect, to speak without being 100% polished. We can exist without trying to justify or defend our sacredness. We can just be. We can feel the water, feel the energy, that exists between our fingers, between our hands, our palms. We are sacred. You are sacred. Your heart is sacred. Your body is sacred. All of you is sacred. And if it's still difficult for you to believe that or feel that or sense that, you are not alone. This may take some time, because we may have lived months, years, decades, maybe even generations, tuned out of our sacredness. And if you find yourself struggling, I think that's even more the reason to keep practicing. If only the top 5% of readers were able to read a book, that would be a sad world. If only the top 5% of writers, and I don't know how we would define the top 5%, but anyways, my point is, when I was in school, I found it very difficult to learn to read, to learn to write. These did not come naturally. These did not come naturally to me. And fortunately, I was supported, and I practiced, and I was given the space to make mistakes and learn from them, and to continue practicing. And now I'm at a place where I can write, I can read, and I can be vulnerable. After growing up in an environment where vulnerability was not safe. And I say that as a gentle mirror, imagining that that is not only my truth, but also probably in some different ways, maybe something that is true for you. And I'm sorry that this is the default assumption that I need to make, that we are all survivors, that we have experienced things that I'm not going to get into, because I don't have the capacity, and I'm guessing you don't either. But I think when people see us, a lot of the time, they might not see our whole selves. They might not see some of the really important parts of ourselves that aren't possible to access without making intentional space. And I want this to be an intentional space to talk about our feelings, to feel our feelings, and to have boundaries. And to do our best to build safety. And one of the ways that I know how to do that is to talk about my own boundaries. which, knowing myself, I don't have the capacity to fully engage with people that I don't know. And I don't have the capacity to provide comprehensive mental health support for you, despite how I want you to have comprehensive mental health supports. I know my own limits, and I don't have the spoons to do that. Because we have boundaries, we have limits. There's only so much that we can do. There's only so much that we can witness, that we can understand. We all have limits. And our limits are sacred. Our boundaries are sacred. And sometimes it's tough to talk about them. I hesitated before bringing up the topic of boundaries because I was afraid that it would be taken the wrong way, that it would be perceived as some sort of rejection or attack, when really, it's the opposite. My boundaries are my truth, are an expression of my vulnerability through my limits. And I appreciate you making space for that sharing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate your witnessing. I appreciate your receiving my invitation to be a gentle mirror. And to hold my vulnerability with care. Ow. Oh. Oh. Wow. That was intense. The sharp edge of my ring scraped the tender insides of my nostril. I would not recommend that sensation unless if you want to feel very tender, which I suppose this video could be described as wildly tender. And perhaps I will end it on that note before I cool off, because I don't want to overheat. I'm gonna cool off. If you want to see how I cool off, that is a sacred bonus activity.